I'm Adeline, 28, female, and my family just made me sit at the kids' table at my own brother's engagement party. They said there wasn't enough room at the main one, a flimsy excuse that floated in the air between us, thin and transparent. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just took my seat between a 7-year-old cousin who was building a fortress out of dinner rolls and a 9-year-old niece who was engrossed in a game on her tablet. Through it all, I watched as my gift envelope, a simple white envelope containing a check that represented years of grueling work and a genuine hope for my brother's happiness, was carelessly tossed aside with the others. It landed on a cluttered side table, just another piece of paper in a pile of well-wishes, its significance utterly lost. But the next morning, my world tilted on its axis when my brother's future father-in-law called me. His voice was serious, cutting through the morning quiet. "Is it true you're the one behind that check?" he asked. I said yes. And then he said the words that would change everything. "Meet me tonight, there's something you deserve to know before the wedding." I'm Adeline, 28, female, and my family just made me sit at the kids' table at my own brother's engagement party. The chair was too small, a garishly bright blue plastic thing that forced my knees up toward my chest. Around me, the children chattered, their high-pitched voices a stark contrast to the low, rumbling laughter of the adults at the main table a few yards away. My brother Ethan sat at the head of that table, beaming. He was the golden sun, the center of our family's universe, and tonight was his coronation. This wasn't a new feeling, this sense of being on the outside looking in. It was a role I had been cast in since childhood. My family dynamic was simple. Ethan was the sun, and the rest of us were planets, expected to orbit him silently and reflect his light. Our parents, Richard and Helen, were the architects of this system. Ethan's crayon drawings were masterpieces. My carefully rendered sketches were a nice hobby. Ethan's C+ in history was a valiant effort against a tough teacher. My straight A's were simply what was expected, acknowledged with a brief nod, before the conversation inevitably shifted back to Ethan's latest soccer game. I remember one specific birthday, my 10th. I had asked for a telescope, my heart set on exploring the stars. I had read every book on astronomy the school library had. Instead, I received a sensible sweater and a book on practical accounting. Later that day, Ethan, whose birthday wasn't for another 6 months, was surprised with a brand new gaming console because he'd been feeling a bit down. My father had ruffled his hair and said, "Anything to see my boy smile." I watched from the doorway, the sensible sweater feeling heavy and scratchy against my skin, and understood. My desires were frivolous, his feelings were paramount. As we grew older, the disparity only deepened. I poured myself into my studies, finding solace in the logic and order of numbers. I pursued a degree in data science, a field my parents dismissed with vague, uncomprehending phrases. "So you play with computers?" my mother would ask at family dinners, her tone laced with a faint, almost pitying confusion. They couldn't grasp it, so they diminished it. Ethan, on the other hand, took a business degree from a local college, breezed through it with mediocre grades, and landed a mid-level management job at a respectable if unremarkable firm. To hear our parents tell it, he was the next titan of industry. "Ethan is a real leader," my father would boom, clapping him on the back. "He manages people, that's a real-world skill." My career, which involved complex algorithms and predictive modeling for a major tech firm, was abstract. His, which involved delegating tasks and approving expense reports, was tangible and therefore more valuable. When I bought my first condo in the city at 26, a milestone achieved through relentless saving and the success of my stock options, my parents' reaction was lukewarm. "Are you sure you can handle such a big mortgage, honey?" my mother had fretted. "It seems a bit lonely, all by yourself in that big building." 2 years later, when Ethan announced he was renting a new apartment, one that was smaller and in a less desirable neighborhood, they threw a small party for him. "Our son is making his own way in the world," they declared, beaming with pride. So when Ethan announced his engagement to Chloe, a genuinely sweet woman from a very wealthy family, it was as if he had won the lottery. My parents were ecstatic. The engagement party was to be the event of the season, hosted in their meticulously manicured backyard. I knew my place. I was to show up, smile, offer my congratulations, and fade into the background. I had spent weeks thinking about their gift. I wanted it to be meaningful. Despite everything, Ethan was still my brother. I wanted him and Chloe to have a good start. My own financial situation was more than stable, it was prosperous. I had worked for it, every last penny. I decided on a check, a sum large enough to serve as a significant down payment on a house. It was a practical gift, a solid foundation for their future. I placed it inside a simple, elegant card, writing, "Wishing you a lifetime of happiness, Ethan and Chloe. Love, Adeline." When I arrived at the party, the main table was already set, a long, beautifully decorated affair under a white canopy. I saw the place cards: Mom, Dad, Ethan, Chloe, Chloe's parents, David and Mary Harrison, and a few of my parents' closest friends. There was no card for me. My mother intercepted me as I looked around, confused. She gave me an airy kiss on the cheek, her hands fluttering nervously. "Adeline, darling, so glad you could make it." She gestured vaguely towards a smaller, round table set off to the side on the lawn. "We were just so tight on space at the main table, you understand. We've set up a fun little spot over there." I followed her gesture. The fun little spot was the kids' table. It was adorned with brightly colored plastic cups and a centerpiece made of balloons. My 7-year-old cousin was already there, meticulously arranging forks. "The kids' table?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush that crawled up my neck. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You'll be a good sport, the kids love you." She patted my arm and then bustled away before I could respond, leaving me standing alone on the grass. I didn't argue. I didn't want to be the cause of a scene at my brother's celebration. So, with as much dignity as I could muster, I walked over to the blue plastic chair and sat down. From my vantage point, I had a clear view of the main table. I watched my brother laugh, basking in the attention. I watched Chloe, radiant and happy, oblivious to the quiet little drama unfolding just feet away. And then I watched as my father collected the gifts. He gathered the envelopes and boxes, carrying them to a side table inside the house. I saw my plain white envelope in his hand. He didn't look at the tag. He didn't pause. He simply tossed it onto the pile with the rest, where it skidded and came to rest next to a brightly wrapped toaster. It was just another object, its contents and the sentiment behind them completely invisible. I stayed for another hour, making polite conversation with a child about cartoons, before slipping away unnoticed. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and a profound, aching emptiness. The next morning, the world felt muted, as if wrapped in gauze. The bright, cheerful sunlight streaming through my condo window seemed like an insult. I sat on my sofa, nursing a cup of coffee I didn't want, replaying the events of the party in my head. It wasn't just the kids' table. It was the lifetime of slights, the thousands of tiny paper cuts that had led to that moment. It was the casual, unthinking cruelty of it all. They didn't even see what they had done, and that, somehow, was the worst part. I was more than just hurt, I was exhausted. I was tired of trying to earn a place that should have been mine by right. I was tired of shrinking myself to make them feel comfortable. For the first time, I seriously considered just stopping. No more obligatory Sunday dinners. No more phone calls where I'd listen to endless praise for Ethan while my own life was treated as an afterthought. Maybe it was time to just let the rope go. Let the distance between us stretch into a silence they might not even notice. The thought was both terrifying and liberating. I was scrolling through my phone, looking at pictures of distant, beautiful places, deserts, mountains, remote islands, when it rang. The name on the screen was one I didn't recognize, but the number was local. I almost ignored it, but on a whim, I answered. "Hello. Is this Adeline?" The voice was male, deep and steady. It was a voice that commanded attention without having to raise its volume. "Yes, this is she," I said, my own voice sounding small. "Adeline, this is David Harrison, Chloe's father." I sat up straight, my heart giving a sudden hard thump against my ribs. David Harrison. Why on earth was he calling me? I had only met him briefly the night before, a firm handshake and a polite smile. He was an intimidating figure, a man who exuded a quiet power. He was the founder and CEO of a massive construction firm, a self-made man with a reputation for being shrewd and principled. "Mr. Harrison," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "Hello, is everything okay?" My mind immediately jumped to Chloe. Had something happened? "Everything is fine, thank you for asking," he said. There was a brief pause, and I could hear the faint sound of papers rustling in the background. "I'm calling about the engagement party." Chloe mentioned that the gifts were brought inside. "I was helping my wife gather our things this morning, and I happened to see the cards being sorted. I saw your envelope." I felt a fresh wave of humiliation wash over me. Was he calling to comment on my gift, to say it was too much or too little? "It was a very generous gesture, Adeline," he continued, his tone unreadable. "Extraordinarily generous." I didn't know what to say. "I just wanted to help them get a good start," I murmured. "I'm sure," he said. Another pause, this one felt heavier. "Which brings me to the reason for my call. I need to ask you a question, and I hope you'll be straight with me." Ethan was vague when I asked him, "Is it true that you are the sole source of the funds in that check, that it came from your own earnings?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that I was momentarily stunned. Yes," I said. "It's from my savings, why?" The sigh on the other end of the line was barely audible, but I heard it. It was a sound of confirmation, of a puzzle piece clicking into place. "I thought so," he said, his voice now holding a grim edge. He implied it was some sort of family fund he had access to. He lied. My brother had lied about my gift, diminishing my contribution even to his future father-in-law, painting it as some anonymous family pot instead of a personal sacrifice from his sister. The anger I felt was sharp and clean, a welcome change from the murky sadness of the morning. "No," I said, my voice gaining strength. "It wasn't a family fund, it was from me." "Thank you for clarifying," David Harrison said. "That's what I needed to know." He cleared his throat. "Listen, Adeline, I'm in a difficult position here. My primary concern is my daughter's happiness and security, but I also believe in fairness. And something about this situation is not fair to you." My breath caught in my throat. "I can't discuss this over the phone," he said. "But I think there's more you deserve to know before that check is cashed and before this wedding goes any further. Would you be willing to meet with me tonight?" The request hung in the air, electric with possibility and danger. A secret meeting with my brother's powerful, intimidating future father-in-law. It felt like something out of a movie. My every instinct screamed at me to be cautious, to not get involved. But a deeper, more insistent voice, the one that had been silenced for years, urged me to say yes. This was a lifeline. This was a chance to understand. "Yes," I said, my heart pounding. "Yes, I'll meet you." "Good," he replied, his tone all business again. "The lounge at the Grand Hotel, 7 o'clock, I'll reserve a quiet table." He hung up, and I was left in the sudden silence of my apartment, the phone still pressed to my ear. The muted gray of the morning had been shattered. Something was wrong, terribly wrong with the picture-perfect life my brother was presenting to the world. And for the first time, someone was offering me a look behind the curtain. The hours leading up to 7 o'clock crawled by. My apartment, usually a sanctuary of calm, felt like a cage. I paced from the living room to the kitchen and back again, my mind a whirlwind of speculation. What could David Harrison possibly need to tell me that was so urgent, so secret? My thoughts spiraled. Had Ethan done something illegal? Was he in some kind of trouble, or was this about Chloe? Maybe she was having second thoughts. Every scenario I imagined seemed more dramatic than the last. Part of me was terrified of what I was about to learn, of the damage it could do. But another, larger part of me felt a grim determination. I had been living in the dark for too long, accepting the narrative my family had written for me. Whatever the truth was, I needed to know it. I chose my outfit carefully, settling on a pair of dark trousers, a simple silk blouse and a blazer. I wanted to look professional, serious. I wanted to look like an equal. When I walked into the lobby of the Grand Hotel, I felt a nervous flutter, but I forced my shoulders back and my head high. The lounge was exactly what I'd expected, dimly lit with plush leather chairs, dark wood, and the quiet clinking of glasses. David Harrison was already there, seated at a secluded corner table. He stood as I approached, a gesture of respect that was so foreign coming from a man of his stature that it almost threw me off balance. "Adeline," he said, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." "Mr. Harrison," I replied, my handshake firm. "Please call me David." He gestured for me to sit. A waiter appeared instantly, and David ordered a scotch for himself and asked what I would like. I ordered a sparkling water, needing to keep a clear head. Once the waiter was gone, the polite facade dropped. David leaned forward slightly, his expression serious. "I won't waste your time with small talk," he began. "I asked you here because I believe you are an unwitting participant in a very calculated deception." I held my breath, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "As you know," he continued, "my wife and I have been very blessed in business. Our greatest treasure, however, is our daughter. When Chloe told us she wanted to marry Ethan, we were happy for her. He seemed like a fine young man, charismatic, ambitious. But I am a cautious man, Adeline. I didn't build my company by taking people at face value." He took a sip of his scotch, his eyes never leaving mine. "So, I did what I always do with a major investment. I did my due diligence. I had a private, discreet background check done on your brother." My stomach turned to ice. A background check. "I expected to find a few youthful indiscretions, perhaps some minor debt," David said, his voice low and even. "What I found was much more concerning. Your brother is not the man he presents himself to be, not even close." He slid a thin folder across the table toward me. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were pages of dry, factual reports, but they told a story that made me feel sick. There were credit card statements showing maxed-out balances, bank records showing a checking account that was consistently overdrawn, and then there was the centerpiece of the report, documents detailing a failed business venture. "Last year, Ethan quit a perfectly good job to start his own consulting firm," David explained, his voice a grim narrator to the documents I was reading. "He told no one in the family, it seems. He certainly didn't tell Chloe. He poured all of his savings into it and took out several high-interest personal loans. The business failed spectacularly within 6 months. He's now in debt to the tune of nearly $100,000. I stared at the numbers, my mind reeling. $100,000. The pieces started to click into place with sickening clarity. The vague answers about his job. The constant, low-level stress I'd seen behind his eyes when he thought no one was looking. His effusive joy about marrying into the wealthy Harrison family. "He's been unemployed for 8 months, David said, confirming my dawning horror. The mid-level management job he claims to have, he was let go from that position before he started his failed venture. He's been living on credit cards and the dregs of those loans ever since. He lied to my daughter. He lied to us. And it seems he's been lying to all of you." I looked up from the folder, my vision blurry. "I had no idea," I whispered. "Of course you didn't," David said, his tone softening with something that sounded almost like sympathy. "He's your brother, you're supposed to trust him." He paused, then delivered the final, crushing blow. "One of those loans has a balloon payment due at the end of the month, a payment of $50,000. If he defaults, it triggers clauses on his other debts. It would ruin him financially and the truth would come out. He was desperate." $50,000. The exact amount of my check. The air left my lungs in a rush. It wasn't a gift. It wasn't a down payment for a happy future. It was a bailout. It was a lifeline he intended to use to plug a hole in his sinking ship, a desperate, last-ditch effort to keep his lies from surfacing just long enough to marry into a fortune. The humiliation of the kids' table suddenly seemed trivial. This was a betrayal on a scale I couldn't comprehend. He hadn't just dismissed me. He had targeted me. He had seen my success not with pride, but as a resource to be exploited. He had counted on my love for him, on my family loyalty, to solve the problems he had created with his own ego and deceit. "When I saw that check last night," David said, "and when he tried to pass it off as family money, I knew. He was counting on your gift to save him. He was going to take your hard-earned money and use it to continue lying to my daughter." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady and resolute. "I cannot allow my daughter to walk into a marriage built on such a profound foundation of lies, and I could not, in good conscience, allow him to defraud his own sister. You worked for that money, Adeline. I looked you up too. Your career is impressive. You've built something for yourself. You deserve to know where your money was really going." I closed the folder, my hands no longer shaking. A cold, hard certainty was settling in my chest, displacing the shock and the hurt. David Harrison had given me more than just information. He had given me validation. He, a stranger, saw my worth more clearly than my own family ever had. He had treated me with respect, the one thing I had craved from them my entire life. "What are you going to do?" I asked, my voice quiet but firm. "My first priority is Chloe," he said. "I will tell her everything. She deserves to make her decision with her eyes wide open. But the check, that is your decision. It hasn't been deposited yet. You can cancel it. Whatever you choose to do, I will support you." I met his gaze, and for the first time in 24 hours, I felt a surge of power. It wasn't vengeful. It was the quiet, solid strength of someone who finally understood the full picture. "Thank you, David," I said. "Thank you for telling me." He simply nodded. The meeting was over. I walked out of the hotel and into the cool night air, the folder clutched in my hand like a shield. The world was no longer muted. It was sharp and clear, and for the first time, I knew exactly what I had to do. The drive back to my condo was on autopilot. My mind was a chaotic landscape of flashing images and echoing words. The numbers on the financial reports, David's grim face, my brother's smiling, deceptive mask at the party. When I walked through my front door, I dropped my keys and the folder onto the kitchen island and stood there in the silent, empty space, breathing. The initial shock was beginning to recede, replaced by a deep, chilling anger. It was an anger unlike any I had ever felt before, not hot and explosive, but cold and methodical. It was the anger of realization. This wasn't just about the money. This was about the fundamental nature of my relationship with my family. I walked to my living room window, looking out at the city lights twinkling below. Each light was a life, a story. What was mine? It was the story of the diligent ant and the celebrated grasshopper. I had spent my life gathering, storing, and building, while my brother danced and played, always confident that someone would provide for him when winter came. I just never imagined that I was meant to be his winter stockpile. I began to connect the dots, re-examining years of memories through this new, harsh lens. The times Ethan had called, asking for a small loan to tide him over. "Just a few hundred, Addie, I'll pay you back next week." The money never came back, and when I'd gently inquire, my mother would inevitably intervene. "Adeline, don't be so petty. He's your brother, it's family." It wasn't a loan, it was an entitlement. I remembered his comments about my job, the ones that had always stung but that I had dismissed as ignorance. "I don't know how you stare at a screen all day," he'd say with a laugh. I'd go crazy. "I need to be out there with people." He wasn't just devaluing my work, he was actively creating a narrative where his people skills, the very skills he used to deceive everyone, were superior to my tangible, profitable expertise. It was a way to maintain his status as the golden child, even as my success quietly eclipsed his. The kids' table, the public, casual humiliation. It felt different now. It wasn't an oversight. It was a strategic move, whether conscious or subconscious. By reinforcing my position as the lesser, childlike sibling, it made it easier for them all to accept my role as the family ATM. You don't sit at the main table with someone you plan to use. You keep them at a distance, in a smaller chair, so their contribution feels like an offering from below, not a gift from an equal. He was going to take my $50,000, the money I had earned, the sleepless nights I had spent on complex projects, the disciplined life I had led, and use it to paper over his lies. He was going to use my success to purchase his own fraudulent one. He would have married Chloe, a woman I genuinely liked, under completely false pretenses, binding her to his mountain of secret debt. And he would have done it all with a smile, accepting the congratulations. While I sat on the sidelines, my purpose served. The betrayal was breathtaking in its scope. It implicated my parents, too. Were they aware of his debts? Maybe not the full extent, but they had to have known things weren't as rosy as they pretended. They were his enablers. Their entire family system was designed to protect Ethan from consequences. They had insulated him with their praise and their willful blindness, forcing me into the role of the stable, responsible one who could be counted on to clean up any messes. I walked back to the kitchen island and picked up my phone. With steady fingers, I opened my banking app. I found the record of the check I had written. It had not yet been cashed. My thumb hovered over the cancel payment button. It was so simple. A single tap to dismantle my brother's house of cards. For a moment, I hesitated. A lifetime of conditioning washed over me, the ingrained instinct to keep the peace, to be the good daughter, the supportive sister. A voice that sounded like my mother's whispered in my head, "You'll tear the family apart." Then I thought of David Harrison, a man who owed me nothing. He had looked at the situation, assessed the facts, and acted with integrity. He had shown me respect. He had valued my work. He had treated me like a person whose assets and feelings mattered. He had shown me what basic decency looked like, and in doing so, illuminated the profound lack of it in my own family. My thumb came down and pressed the button. A confirmation screen popped up. "Are you sure you want to cancel this check?" I pressed confirm without a second's hesitation. A small, green notification appeared at the top of my screen. "Your payment has been successfully canceled." I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vengeful. I felt a profound sense of calm. The decision was made. The first step was taken. But it wasn't enough to simply cancel the check and walk away. That would leave the lies to fester. It would allow Ethan to paint me as the villain, the jealous sister who pulled her support at the last minute for no reason. The truth needed to be brought into the light. Not just for my sake, but for Chloe's. I had to confront them, all of them. And this time, I wouldn't be sitting at the kids' table. I would be at the head of my own. The next day, I woke up feeling a strange new resolve. The knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for years felt looser, as if I had finally identified the source of the poison. I spent the morning preparing. I went for a long run, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement a steady beat against the turmoil of my thoughts. I returned to my apartment and made a proper breakfast, eating slowly and deliberately. This was fuel. This was fortification. My first call was to David Harrison. "David, it's Adeline," I said when he answered. "Adeline, I was hoping you'd call. Are you all right?" "I am," I said, and I was surprised to find that I meant it. "I wanted to thank you again for your honesty, and I wanted to let you know that I have canceled the check." There was a moment of silence on the line. "Good," he said, his voice filled with a quiet approval that warmed me more than any praise from my parents ever had. "That was the right decision. For you." "I also think I need to talk to them," I said, testing the words out loud. "To Ethan and my parents, and I think Chloe should be there." "That is your call to make," he said carefully. "It won't be easy." "I know, but I can't let him control the narrative. He'll twist this, David. He'll tell Chloe I'm jealous, that I'm trying to sabotage their happiness. She needs to hear the truth, and she needs to see his reaction when he's confronted with it." "You're right," David agreed. "She does. Chloe is strong, but she's in love, and that can make anyone blind. She's due to have dinner at your parents' house tomorrow night to discuss some wedding details. It might be the opportune moment." It was perfect. A prearranged meeting about the wedding. They would be completely unsuspecting. "Thank you, David," I said, "for everything." "You're the one being brave here, Adeline," he replied. "Call me if you need anything." After we hung up, I composed a text message. I sent it into the family group chat, a digital space usually reserved for my mother sharing blurry photos and Ethan announcing his minor triumphs. "Hi everyone. I'd like to join you for dinner tomorrow night if that's okay. I have some ideas about the wedding gift and want to discuss financial plans to best help Ethan and Chloe. It was the perfect bait. The mention of money, of helping Ethan, would be irresistible to them. It framed me in my usual role, the supportive, financially stable younger sister, ready to contribute to the golden child's glory. My mother replied almost instantly, "Of course, darling, we'd love to have you. So thoughtful of you to be thinking about their future. See you at 7." Ethan's reply came a few minutes later. A simple thumbs-up emoji. He had no idea he was confirming his own execution. The rest of the day and the next were a study in controlled calm. I went to work. I focused on my projects, finding comfort in the clean, irrefutable logic of data. My colleagues noticed nothing amiss, but inside I was rehearsing. I was going over the facts from David's folder, memorizing the key numbers, the dates. I wasn't planning a screaming match. I was planning a surgical strike. My weapon wasn't anger, it was the truth. As I drove to my parents' house the next evening, the familiar dread that always accompanied this trip was gone. In its place was a steely sense of purpose. I was no longer the little girl hoping for a telescope. I was no longer the young woman biting her tongue as her achievements were dismissed. I was Adeline, 28, female, and I was about to rewrite my own story. I pulled into the driveway and took one final, deep breath. I thought about the little blue plastic chair on the lawn. Tonight, there would be no kids' table. I was done being small. I got out of the car and walked to the front door of the house I grew up in, feeling for all the world like a stranger arriving to audit the books. The scene inside was one of perfect domestic bliss, a stage play my family had been performing for decades. My mother, Helen, was bustling from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. My father, Richard, was laughing at something on TV. And on the sofa, my brother Ethan sat with his arm around Chloe, the picture of a devoted fiancé. They all looked up as I entered, their smiles welcoming. It was so normal, so practiced, it almost made me doubt myself. "Adeline, darling, you're right on time," my mother chirped, giving me her usual airy kiss. "Good to see you, kiddo," my father said, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Hey, Addie," Ethan said, his smile wide and confident. He had no idea. Chloe and I were just talking about honeymoon destinations. Chloe gave me a warm, genuine smile. "Hi, Adeline, it's so good to see you. Thanks for joining us." Her innocence in this whole charade was the sharpest pang of guilt I felt. What I was about to do would hurt her, at least in the short term. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that the truth was a cleaner wound than a marriage built on lies. We moved to the dining room, the same room where the main table had been set for the party. Tonight, there was a place for me. We made it through the salad course with idle chatter about the weather and wedding plans. My parents lauded Ethan's impeccable taste in choosing the venue. Ethan preened under the praise. I ate silently, gathering my strength. It was my mother who gave me the opening. "So, Adeline," she said, her voice bright and encouraging, "you said on the text that you wanted to talk about the gift. That's so generous of you, honey. We were all so touched." I saw Ethan flash a quick, triumphant smirk. He thought this was it. The moment his little sister officially handed over the funds to solve all his problems. I placed my fork down gently on my plate. "Yes," I said, my voice calm and even, cutting through the light dinner conversation. "I did want to talk about that." I looked directly at my brother. "Ethan, the check I gave you was for $50,000. I intended it as a down payment on a house for you and Chloe." "We know, Addie, and we're so grateful," he said, reaching over to pat Chloe's hand. "It's going to make a huge difference." "I'm sure it would," I said. "But a house is a big commitment, and I was thinking about the best way to structure the gift. So, just to help me plan, can you tell me a little more about your current financial situation? Your job at the firm, for instance. How's that going?" The air in the room shifted. My father muted the TV. My mother's smile tightened. Ethan's hand froze on Chloe's. "My job is great," he said, a little too quickly. "Things are going really well. Big projects on the horizon." That's wonderful, I said, my voice still light, because I was under the impression that you hadn't been employed there for over a year. Silence, a thick, heavy silence dropped over the table. Chloe turned her head to look at Ethan, her brow furrowed in confusion. What is she talking about, Ethan? She's confused, Ethan stammered, his eyes darting toward me with a flash of panic and fury. Addie, what kind of joke is this? It's no joke, I said calmly. I turned my attention to Chloe. Chloe, last year, Ethan quit his job to start a private consulting firm. It failed after 6 months. That's a lie, Ethan exploded, slamming his hand on the table. Adeline, what is wrong with you? Why are you trying to ruin this? Is it a lie? I countered, my voice never rising. Is it a lie that you are currently carrying nearly $100,000 in high-interest personal debt from that failed business? Chloe gasped, pulling her hand away from Ethan's as if she had been burned. Ethan, is this true? Of course not, he shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. She's making it up. Mom, Dad, tell her. She's always been jealous of me, always. My parents jumped to his defense, as I knew they would. Adeline, that is enough, my father boomed, his voice full of righteous anger. How dare you come into this house and tell such vicious lies about your brother? You've always resented his success, my mother added, her eyes welling with tears. To try and sabotage his happiness like this, it's monstrous. I let their accusations hang in the air. I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I just held their gazes, one by one. Then I looked back at Ethan. Is it also a lie, I asked, my voice dropping to an almost clinical tone, that you have a $50,000 balloon payment due on one of those loans at the end of this month? And that my gift, my down payment for a house, was going to be used to cover it up so you could go through with this wedding without Chloe or her family finding out? That was the final blow. Ethan's face crumpled. The blustering rage drained away, leaving behind the terrified, cornered look of a man whose deceptions had finally caught up with him. He couldn't speak. He just stared at his plate. Chloe stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with a horrifying clarity. She looked from Ethan's guilty face to my calm one, and she knew it was all true. You lied to me, she whispered, her voice trembling with shock and betrayal. All this time, you lied about everything. I finally looked at my parents. Their faces were a mask of disbelief. They were staring at their golden son, the perfect image they had so carefully constructed, as he shattered before their eyes. For the record, I said, my voice clear and steady as I pushed my chair back and stood up. I canceled the check yesterday morning. The money is no longer available. I looked at Ethan one last time. My gift was for a future Ethan, not to pay for your past. I turned and walked out of the dining room, leaving a tableau of ruin behind me. I heard Chloe's choked sob. I heard my father stammering Ethan's name. I heard my mother start to cry. I didn't look back. I walked out the front door, closed it gently behind me, and for the first time in my life I felt truly, completely free. The week that followed the confrontation was one of profound silence. My phone, usually buzzing with the meaningless chatter of the family group chat, remained quiet. There were no angry calls, no pleading texts, no attempts at an apology. It was as if, by speaking the truth, I had ceased to exist for them. The silence wasn't painful, it was peaceful. It was the sound of a cage door swinging open. I spent the week rediscovering my own space, my own time. I worked, I saw friends, I read books. I didn't have to brace myself for the next casual slight or the next demand disguised as a family obligation. The weight I had been carrying on my shoulders for 28 years was gone, and I felt lighter than I ever had. The first call came exactly 1 week later. The caller ID read Chloe Harrison. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. Hello. Adeline, it's Chloe. Her voice was fragile but clear. I just wanted to call and say I'm sorry. Chloe, you have nothing to be sorry for, I said immediately. Yes, I do, she insisted. I'm sorry for being so blind. I'm sorry I didn't see how they treated you, and most of all, I'm sorry for what he was going to do to you, using you like that. Her voice broke. Thank you for telling me the truth. It must have been the hardest thing you've ever had to do. Is the wedding? I started, not sure how to phrase the question. It's off, she said simply. It's over. My dad was right. A marriage can't start with that many lies. We talked for a little while longer. She was staying with her parents, trying to piece things together. She sounded hurt, but she also sounded resilient. By the end of the call, I felt a sense of connection with her, a bond forged in the wreckage of Ethan's deceit. The second call came a few days after that. It was David Harrison. Adeline, he said, his voice warm. I heard from Chloe that you two spoke. She told me how you handled things, with grace and strength. I'm not surprised. I just did what I had to do, I said. Yes, you did, he said. Listen, the reason I'm calling is twofold. First, to see how you are, and second, to make you an offer. I was looking over your professional profile again. You're very good at what you do. My company is expanding our data analytics division. We're looking for someone to lead the new team, someone with vision and integrity. He paused. I can think of no one better qualified than you. If you're interested, the job is yours. I was speechless. A job offer, a leadership position, from him. It wasn't charity, I knew my own qualifications. It was recognition, it was respect. It was an opportunity to build something new, completely separate from the shadows of my past. David, I don't know what to say, I stammered. Think about it, he said kindly. No pressure, but I know talent when I see it, and I believe in betting on good people. After we hung up, I sat by my window, looking out at the sprawling city. My life felt like a blank page. The old story, the one where I was the perpetual supporting character, was over. The final chapter had been written. My relationship with my parents and brother was likely damaged beyond repair, and while a part of me mourned the family I wished I'd had, a much larger part of me felt an overwhelming sense of relief. I had been defined by them for so long, by their expectations, their dismissals, their carefully constructed hierarchy. I had been Adeline, the other child, the quiet one, the backup plan. Now I was just Adeline, a woman who had found her voice. A woman respected by her peers. A woman with a future of her own making, full of possibilities I was only just beginning to see. I realized that family isn't just about the blood you share. It's about the people who see you, who value you, and who tell you the truth, even when it's hard. I had lost one family, but I was on the cusp of building another, one founded on the solid bedrock of mutual respect and honesty, and that was a foundation that no amount of lies could ever shake. So I have to ask you, the listeners, what would you have done? Would you have canceled the check? Would you have confronted your family, knowing it could tear everything apart? Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from a situation that is slowly draining the life out of you. Setting a boundary isn't an act of aggression, it's an act of self-preservation.